We're reaching the end of the Mike Hopkins era at Washington.
You are Locked On Huskies, your daily podcast on the Washington Huskies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back into another edition of the Locked On Huskies podcast. I'm Roman Tomashoff. That's Lars Hanson. He writes for Inside the Huskies of Fan Nation Sports Illustrated. I'm the site editor over with Huskies Wire. Thank you for making this your first watch or first listen of the day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers join today and you'll get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. All right, Lars, we're doing something we haven't really, done a lot of, and we're talking basketball today. And we've gotten a lot of feedback from the everydayers where some are saying, we don't really need to listen to a whole bunch of basketball stuff until Mike Hopkins gets fired. And well, hey, that's what we're going to talk about today. So we're reaching the end of the Mike Hopkins era at Washington, like I said, in the little opener. And I've seen a lot of stuff on Twitter, a lot of stuff on social media. I know you have as well, where it's all right. Well, why hasn't this happened already? Why didn't this happen a year and a half ago? Why are we still waiting on this moment? And do you want to just take the everydayers through really quickly why we haven't seen Mike Hopkins get fired just yet?
Yeah. So basically, let's kind of go macro to micro. So let's go back to why was he not fired coming into the season? Why did he get one more season? Well, there's two main reasons. One, the buyout, and to be clear, when we're talking about this type of a buyout, so there's two types of buyouts for college coaches. The Keion Brooks Jr. buyout, which Alabama has to pay because, hey, we want to hire your guy away, which usually that buyout is north of what is on the contract, or at least a little bit more. In the case of Mike
structured
Hopkins,
very differently.
Yeah, exactly. And so in the case of Mike Hopkins, it's how much is left on the contract. That's what your buyout is. That's what you're paying him to leave. You're paying him the rest of his contract, which would be prorated. He was making, I think, 3.3 or 3.2, and he makes 3.1 in his last, and he, I believe, would make 3.1 next season. So that would be once you get to the end of the 2023-24 season in April, which not is when the end of the season is, but when his contract renews or flips over to the final fiscal calendar year, so to speak,
which is April 1st.
Right, exactly. Which, I mean, it's just really funny where, like, the amount of kind of the irony of what we're talking about, where, oh, hey, is Mike Hopkins fired on April Fool's Day? Like, is this a joke or is this real? Like, we're going to have a lot of fun, I'm sure, with that conversation when it comes time. It's like, wait, is this real? Like, all these fan burner accounts tweeting it. And so the reason why Jen Cohen at the time was still the athletic director, Troy Dannon inherited this past season, so he's not going to fire him with 1 month left, especially with the way football was going. So Jen Cohen basically looked at the situation and said, okay, I'll give you have 2 more years left on your contract. It's a steep price, which would have been, I believe, around $6-7 million.
It would have been 6.2 is how much it would have been, 6.2 million.
Right. And if you think about that, that's before Keion Brooks $12 million buyout. And the athletic department at the time, when you're making this move to the Big Ten down, the next 24 months, so to speak, at the time, you're thinking, okay, well, let's not spend unnecessary money when you're not looking at Hopkins and thinking, okay, he's going to be like 5-22, right? It's not going to be a train wreck. But when we'll talk about later, it's kind of like it's a different kind of a train wreck because this roster is too good to be just above 500. Now, again, why are they 500? Because of the coach. So Mike Hopkins as a person is probably one of the more likable guys you're going to have, right? He'll never say a bad thing. He never goes after me. Even if you have a bad question, he'll kind of almost return and be like, well, I know what you're trying to say, but like, I'm just going to go over here and take it positively, or, put some coach spin on it.
So let's, sorry, I just want to add on to a little bit of what you're saying there, because one thing that you talked about was this roster, where it kind of felt like that was another reason that he was able to come back and able to have one more shot, where he and his coaching staff did a really good job putting this roster together. They were able to go get Wesley Yates, who we haven't seen yet due to an injury. There are a whole lot of other guys that it was, okay, yeah, go get Nate Calmese. He's really promising. Getting Corin Johnson to come back and stay. He looks really good. Getting Sahvir Wheeler. Keion Brooks comes back. Where there are a lot of really nice pieces on this team where you and I kind of sat back and looked at it and said, yeah, there's a world where we can see this team making the tournament, not necessarily making a run in the tournament, but yeah, they could win a game. Maybe they could win 2, right? That was a very possible scenario. And then the result that we have seen so far this season is painfully average, where we can talk about Saturday night's loss against Cal, where, you had 2 timeouts and you choose not to use one to advance the ball 4 seconds on the clock. Like, that's ridiculous. There have been too many moments like that. And so when fans are saying this is long overdue, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. But from what you're saying, financially, especially, one thing that you didn't mention that had to be considered on top of all this was the buyout of Jimmy Lake that had to happen, where that's another thing that needs to be considered, where, when Washington after the 2021 season wasn't necessarily making a ton of money, it wasn't super feasible to fire Hop before the 2022 season. And then even after last year, it was, all right, we still have to pay this Jimmy Lake buyout. Yeah, football's making more money, but that was before this sort of run that we saw in 2023 where the revenue is going to go way up. So it kind of all fell together in the worst sense for, Jen Cohen and now Troy Dannon, where it's okay. Like the financial sense doesn't all add up right now, but you can still get away with the $3 million buyout especially with all the money that you get from Alabama, where you can allocate funds elsewhere, move it around, do different things. But there were just so many reasons why it couldn't fall together. I'm sorry, I cut you off. Please continue.
No, I was going to say, because that was the one thing that I was kind of forgetting. When mentioning they didn't have Keion DeBoer's buyout last year. Well, not only did they not have that buyout, they had to pay another one, to your point. And so it's not, and when you would think, okay, well, UW isn't Texas A&M, they're not just bleeding money, right? You have Bill Gates and Ballmer and all those things, but not all of that gets earmarked to, men's basketball, right? Most of it, again, to your point, goes to football. So now when you give Hopkins one more year, he had plenty of resources over the summer, and did, right, to his credit, right, go out and get a decent amount. Moses Wood is a 3-point shooter. Paul Mulcahy, you get him as a 4-year starter from Rutgers. You think, okay, last season the indictment was kind of, okay, well, you have Keion and a bunch of kids, right? And then Frank Kepnon gets hurt last year in, I believe, mid-December, early January, almost ironically kind of around the same time that he did this season. And so you think, okay, well, with a healthy Kepnon, Braxton maybe improves, Hopkins made some coaching changes where Wyking Jones is out, Quincy Pondexter and Ben Lee come in. Pondexter was already on the staff last year, but Ben Lee would be the new one. And you kind of thought, okay, maybe, it's to your kind of what we're saying here. It's same problem still at the top where, okay, Hopkins goes away from the zone this year. So he's willing to get out of his shell, right? He's willing to try new things, and it's working, right? I've talked to him many times this season. He says, well, the offense isn't the problem. It's defense. And it's like, okay, well, almost like
the worst defense in the Pac-12 in terms of points per game.
Exactly. And the problem that arises with that is you can't say, oh, well, we're, young. We're still inexperienced, right? These guys got to learn to play college defense. No, you have Moses Wood, a 3-time transfer. You have Paul Mulcahy, a former, what would be Big 12.
Your starter, as you said, yeah.
Right. No, I'm trying to remember which conference Rutgers is.
Oh, Big East. It was Big East for a while.
Exactly. And so, but you're having guys with legitimate experience, and even getting, to your point, Nate Calmes from Lamar, leading scorer in the
in their conference, yeah.
Right, yeah, I was going to say Southwest Conference. But the point is, a very promising freshman, like, he can come off the bench. And then this season, everything has been from Hopkins. Well, Corin's got to get better at defense. And then we see him get better at defense, but then it's not consistent. It's like, well, you can say, well, the kid's got to still execute the game plan and things like that. But it's almost looking like, well, what actually is the game plan? Like, okay, you're going away from the zone, fine. But then you're also saying, well, hey, Braxton was great in the zone. If we went back to the zone, maybe we'd be great. It's like, yeah, but then, again, it's almost robbing Peter to pay Paul. There's no actual answer, right? You can't look at this team and say, hey, they won 2 games in a row. It's like, yeah, but one was a narrow win. And, it's like they blow out Utah and they blow out Oregon State. And then they lose in a squeaker to Cal. And they beat Cal on a buzzer beater down in Berkeley. So it's like, and Cal is not anywhere near what they should be, right? Same thing with Washington, right? It's like you're beating these lame to below average teams, and you have better than average talent, and yet the coaching overall, just whatever is causing it, which again falls on the head coach, just isn't working out.
Right. And with that being said, is the favorite for the next head coach in the building already? And we'll get to that right after a message from our friends over at FanDuel, because you can get buckets with your first bet on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your bet wins. You can bet on all your favorite NBA players and teams with quick bets, live same game parlays, exclusive props, and more. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and shoot your shot. FanDuel is an official sportsbook partner of the NBA. And you know what, Lars? Real quickly, I just want to say, even though he missed, shout out to Gronk for FanDuel's second kick of destiny. I was a little disappointed, I'm getting a chance to chat with him a couple weeks ago, but I gotta say, I'm really disappointed that he missed. So let's talk about Will Conroy, because Will Conroy has been with Washington for what feels like 100 years at this point, and there's a good chance that he should be the favorite to take over for Mike Hopkins, where, there's definitely a portion of the fan base that's pushing for him. Would you be for or against that?
So to be fully transparent, I have kind of maintained this opinion where nobody on the current coaching staff should be the one to, be the next guy, right? Because in my opinion, now again, this is kind of where I was kind of coming into the season and just the general nature of this discussion, where if Will Conroy or Viking or Quincy Pondexter or somebody else had all the answers right and was, like, hey, I'm coaching these guys in practice, and like, hey, I have all the ideas, but then somebody else isn't using them, or Hopkins is like, no, we're not going to do that. You're giving me all the right things to do to make this program a winner, and I'm saying no. How can you? What is the credence aside from he's a former UW legend, basketball hooper, lifer in the 206? So it'd be massive for the in-state, right? And we'll talk later about what the case for Conroy, because obviously there's a couple, and even in the 2024 class, right? But with that being said, it's okay, what are you getting? So if you're firing Hopkins, right, who was a lifetime assistant coach, right, under Jim Boeheim at Syracuse, so he came here not being a head coach. You're now going to go to another hasn't been a head coach at any level. I mean, maybe, I don't believe he has. I don't even think in high school Will Conroy is, because it was Brandon Roy, right, the other former UW legend that other people have suggested. But again, taking a coach with no head coaching experience, the only caveat to Conroy is he's been there. He's been under Romar and now under Hopkins. And, he would be kind of the popular favorite, right? For having FanDuel odds, if you ask Washington fans who would be the next head coach, Will Conroy is probably the favorite to win the job, right? Just based on fan opinion. But now if you're Troy Dannon, do you look at it and say, okay, I like Will. He's a good dude, good person, good coach, all that, great connector, massive in the community. And one thing that you can say about Conroy, through all the highs and lows that he's been as an assistant, he's always been that one coach on the bench, just trying to rally, trying to always speak. He's the one basically putting in the in-state recruiting efforts, right? The one getting on the mic before the season opener and saying, don't turn your back on Washington, put Washington on your back. It's exactly what Zoom Diallo told me after he made his commitment in December. It's, hey, I don't need to go anywhere else. And Conroy was the one that was his lead recruiter. Right. Hopkins didn't even know he was committing until afterwards when he got a phone call, and obviously when they were watching it on TV. But it's a matter of, okay, what, aside from all that good kind of the goodwill that Conroy has built up, what on paper would say, okay, this is going to be different than what it was with Hopkins? So
I hear your point, but on the other side of that, let's talk about it this way, where you turn the reins over to somebody like him, where, it wouldn't be the most expensive hire, where you're not going out and hiring Jed Fish to comp it to football, where, that's the biggest, most expensive hire on the market that you could possibly make. Whereas, is that going to be a concern? Probably not. But when you look at it from that standpoint, you can say, all right, I need to make sure that you can bring in some top flight assistant coaches. And I trust, especially with some of the connections that Conroy has. And I'm just using this name as an example because who knows if this is a route that he wants to go down. Why not bring in somebody like Jamal Crawford, where, you can say, all right, we're going to pay him top dollar as an assistant coach. We can hang on to Will Conroy and say, look, we know what you do on the recruiting trail. Keep doing that. We are going to put the perfect staff in place to make sure that this all works out. Because one thing that's really disappointing that seems to have been lost throughout all of this is the basketball culture of Seattle, where here in Seattle, we still don't have an NBA team to fall back on. Probably will in a couple of years. That'll be great. But do you have a point? Or
I was going to say 2026 is when they're coming back.
Please. Oh yeah, no, yeah, I'm waiting for it. But to that point, we still don't have that basketball team. So, but that's something that's just beloved around the city. And so that would fall to Washington to be that top flight basketball school, which we know in the late 2000s, the early 2010s, it was in the years of Terrence Ross, Isaiah Thomas, Justin Holiday. I could bring up just some of my favorite names in that era all day long, like CJ Wilcox, Scott Suggs, Darnell Gant. There's so many guys that you can go down that list and just say, yeah, these are all guys that left a legacy here. We saw teams make a run to the Sweet 16. It's very possible. Will Conroy knows that better than anybody. And while he might not be the most experienced coach, from a head coaching perspective, there are a lot of ways, especially with, the way Troy Danon has shown, hey, I'm going to spend on football because I know that makes money. He's a smart guy. He understands that if the basketball program is playing as well as it can, it's going to make a lot of money as well. So if you can find a way to put that system in place, it seems like Conroy is the right person to be at the helm for all that.
Exactly. And so now let's get to the back half. So that what I said last was coming into the season, why you make the case against Conroy. From what I've gleaned, and I'm going to use this how you kind of structurally, from what I've gathered, right? Just being on the beat, being around the team this season, I've certainly warmed up to the possibility of Conroy being a head coach. And the reason is because one thing Troy Danon talked a lot about in his opening press comments, and we've both known and kind of almost experienced firsthand, right, with him, is relationships. Conroy is the perfect relationship guy where, if anything, let's say you're Troy Danon, you could hire Will Conroy, give him a 5-year deal to be cheap, and you give him at least 2 years, right? Because in college basketball, you can at least get 2 years. And if anything, that gets you to 2026 when the NBA comes back to Seattle. And then now you kind of parlay almost like Jed Fish, right, with the 33rd NFL team. The Huskies can be like, hey, we haven't had a ton of guys, but now that we have the NBA back, you got Marquise Chris, you got DeJounte Murray, you got Matisse Thybulle, you got a number that are still in the league right now. Not only that,
look at Jaden McDaniels.
Jaden McDaniels, another one. So there's so many of these guys, and even McDaniels played for Hopkins, right? And so all these guys, but they also play for Conroy. And so I think the one thing, and even the important thing to mention here is, for all the recruits that did leave, right? Paulo Blanchero is kind of the example that comes to mind where, okay, well, how come Conroy couldn't get him? It's like, well, he's getting Zoom Diallo, one, and it's kind of hard to turn down Mike Krzyzewski, right? Especially in his last year as a coach. 5 stars, like, hey, that's almost like the perfect recruiting pitch for any recruit. It's like, if Washington had that, it would have been a slam dunk for Washington, but that wasn't the case. And so the fact that Conroy can still maintain those relationships, right? We've even seen Paulo on the sideline before UW football games. So he's clearly willing to be involved, and you have to know Conroy is always going to be one of those guys that's building that bridge to those relationships. And so I've certainly warmed up to the possibility of it. And if anything, you have to know Conroy would get those stands packed, right? He would find a way. He'd be plugged in with the students. It would at least there'd be more energy in the program, right? There'd be more like, hey, we finally got our guy. Let's at least give Conroy a shot. Let's to use the analogy that you said with Keion DeBoer, when Sopke pointed out, hey, this is all available to you. Conroy can kind of do the same for basketball. Hey, the city of Seattle, basketball, everything that the rich history of basketball in the city provides, Washington can do that. Now, again, Hopkins has said that, Romar has acknowledged that, but Conroy almost just seems like, since he hasn't gone anywhere else to be a head coach, he could have been a mid-major head coach by now if he really wanted to leave and do his own thing. I think he's almost put in so much time to where it's hard to say that he's not worth at least giving it a shot to, right? Where it's like, he's such a good person, the goodwill, he's a good coach, developer, all that. Give him a shot. If it doesn't work out, okay, you know what? He can go be a basketball assistant in the NBA, or he can go do something else. But it's one of those, at least give him a shot.
Exactly. And that's the biggest part of all this, right? Where you look at where, some people might say, oh, well, look how well that worked out with Chris Peterson and Jimmy Lake, where that's a very different discussion in terms of, one of the biggest things about it is that Conroy is a local guy. Where I feel like that's where it all really boils down to with this, is so much of that is he's always been the most vocal person on social media, in the stands, on the sidelines, wherever he might be. He's always been just all about this university, and he's dedicated to making it as great as he possibly can. So why not give that guy a shot where, you're never, I don't think we're going to see all right, we're going to go out and just give the job over to him where, Troy Danon's going to say, yeah, we've got to conduct a search. Yeah, we'll interview him. Like they interviewed Ryan Grubb for the head coaching job after Kalen left. So it's not like he's just going to be handed the job, but I wouldn't be surprised if they conduct a search. You look around a little bit and just say, yeah, no, Conroy is the guy where we think that he can definitely take this program back to where we know it can be. And with that being said, what's it going to take for them to make the NCAA tournament in 2025? Right after we send a message to our good friends over at LinkedIn, because when you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs is a tool to help find the right professionals for your team faster and for free, because hiring is easy when you have so many quality candidates, because LinkedIn has a vast network of more than 1 billion professionals. It's so easy that 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. LinkedIn knows that small businesses are wearing so many hats, it might not have the time or resources to hire. LinkedIn is constantly finding ways to help make the hiring process easier. They even just launched a feature that helps you write job descriptions, making the process even easier and quicker. With more than 2.5 million small businesses using LinkedIn for hiring, there are so many ways that just to get involved. And if you want to get involved, you can post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockdowncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockdowncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. So Lars, let's start with the caveat that there's a very slim chance that Washington can still make the NCAA tournament in 2024. But that would require probably, first of all, upsetting Arizona, who's ranked at number 3 right now, in Tucson this weekend. That's going to be really tough. And then on top of that, probably going undefeated down the stretch. And on top of that, probably going to have to be a top 4 finisher in the Pac-12 tournament. So the odds are not 0, but they're very, very slim. So let's kind of take a step forward and talk about 2025, because, depending on what might happen, there's going to be a lot of talent on this team. I wouldn't be surprised if Keion Johnson comes back again. Nate Calmese is still going to be around. You probably looking at another year of Wesley Yates of things, the way things have turned out. Then Casimir Chavis and Zoom Diallo are coming in. So there's a lot of nice, really nice, truly guard depth on this team. So the question is, where do you go from there? And it feels like it starts with getting a couple of big men.
Right, exactly. When the ironic part is also Frank Hepnong still does have eligibility left. So there is a chance that he could come back and things like that. But I think that kind of almost gets to why whoever does, if it's Conroy or whoever is that next head coach, you're going to have to lean in the portal, obviously, because that's just kind of the way in college basketball is going. Even Washington this past season, you had Corin and Keion coming back. But I don't think when Braxton. But other than those 3, nobody else that played last season went Frank. But aside from those 4, with Frank being out hurt now, it's really 3 that you're basically leaning on the portal year in and year out. So I think the thing to consider is keeping Zoom Diallo. That's kind of where it starts, right? Because if you can keep Zoom Diallo, that solves a massive problem. Because again, you're not going to have Sahvir Wheeler because he's graduating. Nate Calmese and Keion Johnson are your main 2 guards. Wesley Yates obviously being the 3rd, but similar to Cash, where it's like, okay, neither of them played in college basketball, so you can't truly assess what they're going to be. But even then, still having both of those guys on the roster allows you to have that flexibility and go 7, 8, 9 deep, right? Not just have to throw out the same 6 guys and hope that, nobody gets into foul trouble. Because really that's what it's been under Hopkins. It's darn, now we're in foul trouble. Now we don't have a big, which we already didn't have to start with. And to your point, that's where I think it's going to be interesting for whoever the head coach is to make sure you have more than 2 serviceable bigs. And not because, again, Wilhelm Breidenbach is kind of a hybrid, right? They've been playing him at the 5, but he's not truly a 5, right? So
no, he's more of a stretch 4 kind of guy. Yeah,
exactly. Now he's good, right? He's been serviceable. Now again, some people say, well, he's airball. Like, but he also is at least willing to put in. He's the Kurt Rambis guy, to use Hopkins' analogy, right? Where he's the guy that does the hard work, the gritty work. He's never going to look lost out there. So you do need some of those guys as well. And so I think it's just a matter of, you clearly want to get a head coach in there who understands the portal, who understands also how to balance a roster, because just like back in the day when John Calipari is signing 6 one-and-done guys, okay, well, you either got to do that every year and recruit at a 5-star level every year, or you got to recruit the portal to that level. And in college basketball, it's not easier to recruit the portal, but it's certainly there's plenty of options in the portal. And so it's just a matter of who can get the best ones.
It almost, and that's kind of, it circles back to our Conroy discussion a little bit, where you would have a little bit more faith that you can find a healthy middle ground, where he's done a good job of getting guys out of the portal. He's done a good job of getting guys out of high school, where if you can build a staff and it's, the same thing we've talked about with football, where if you can build a staff that's going to recruit at a high level and not just say, all right, we're going to do this for 2 years and then we're going to go somewhere else. you can find a way to make it work. You can find a way to balance it and just say, yeah, we know that we're going to need some established, because it feels like it's just really hard to find some of those quality big men sometimes through the high school ranks. So if you want to go get a couple of transfer big men, where we saw Braxton Mia really develop in a good way last season. And, I'm still waiting for him to kind of take another step forward, where there are some ways where it looks like he has gotten a lot better, but there's still a couple of things that he needs to work on. And you can go get some of those kinds of guys in the portal and just say, yeah, we trust our development to work with these guys. But it's a lot easier to throw somebody like Braxton, who was in his third year when he came to Washington, and somebody like Frank Kepnang, who'd spent 3-4 years down at Oregon, where you can go get those guys and say, yeah, we trust you to throw you in the middle. We know that you'll be here for a year or two, and then just bring in some quality scoring depth around them.
Right, and I think that's kind of the thing with the team this season. They've had plenty of scorers. Scoring really hasn't been the option, whether it's Keion or Sahvir or Corin off the bench, right? But it's okay. You can have some scorers, but someone's also got to play defense, and that's kind of, Paul McKay's been pretty good on defense, but you need to have 3 or 4 guys, right? It can't just be when Paul comes out or if Paul's hurt, now you're struggling, right? I've even seen Corin get a lot better on defense, so I think. And that's kind of the frustrating part with where the team is at. It's like, okay, you're seeing these improvements, but it's, 1 step forward, 2 steps back, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. And you keep alternating that where you're not really going anywhere. You're kind of going there, and then you're not. And so the key for this program is consistency, right? Where it's like, win 3, 4, 5 in a row, and then maybe lose 1 or 2 in a row, but then win 3 or 4 in a row. Kind of prove that the talent that you have, because this is a talented team. I think that's the thing. When they can go off and outshoot Stanford and win by 20. Like again, now Stanford's not great, but it's like, hey, you can put teams away. At times earlier in the season, they couldn't put teams away. So they've gotten better, but then well, now there's no Frank, and now there's no this and that, and okay, now we're basically like a 7-man rotation, and it's one of those where even if you give Hop another year, it's like, okay, well, again, you still got to go back into the portal and find some bigs, because
you got to find a whole new roster, basically.
Exactly, and ironically, it's that's the thing about college basketball. It's different than football, where because of the limited numbers in basketball, you kind of almost sometimes have to go more to the portal than the high school, right? Because going to all those AAU tournaments and all that versus just waiting until after the season and seeing who jumps in the portal and say, okay, these guys are pretty good. If they jump in the portal, we'll go get them because they fit our scheme. That's different than all the energy you have to put into a high school recruit. So it's not bad if you only have 1 or 2 high school signees and the rest of your roster is built in the portal, but it has to be staggered. It can't just be, hey, we're going to bring in 5 seniors and, hope that it all clicks right away. It's like, well, that's good, but that also means you can't really develop somebody else. You have to develop your own guys and bring others along. And so I think that's kind of the enigma that the program is in, where, if Frank Kepnang is healthy and doesn't get hurt, this team is probably, I don't know, I think 4 or 5 wins better, right? Just right now.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a lot different.
Absolutely.
But then you can't put that on Frank, because every year we had this discussion off air where it's, well, every coach can say, hey, well, as long as we don't have this guy and this guy get hurt, we're good. It's like, well, the point of building out a roster, which like in football, is you plan for, if need be, 2 or 3 guys at running back, right? You don't want just one bell cow that if he gets down, now you got to walk on. It's like, and it seems like that this coaching staff is kind of like they've been weathering that storm, but it's like you shouldn't be weathering that storm. You should be out of that storm.
Absolutely. Where, like you said, there are ways to build up quality depth, and there are certain places that they've done that. Like I said, look at the backcourt right now, where you can run 4, 5, 6 guys deep and just say, yeah, there are a lot of quality options that you have back there. But you look up front and it's not the same. Where there hasn't, and it's just kind of the way college basketball has gone, where you're not going to see a lot of dominant low post scorers in this day and age. And you can say the same thing about the NBA. So, but you can find a way to go find those guys. And why not say, yeah, why not go get 2 really solid rebounders and that can play just high quality defense like Frank Kepnang can, where you can find a way to go do that. And it feels clear that, when you look at this roster, where, bringing in Sahvir, getting Keion to stay, getting Frank to stay, going out and getting Paul Mulcahy, Moses Wood, while also bringing in Wesley Yates and all these other guys, that the resources to build a quality basketball roster are there, but it just needs to be executed better on the court, especially.
and consistently executed. I think that's the thing, because I mean, and the other one, you're talking about Wesley Yates, a 4-star, but then the other one you signed is Christian King, who's redshirting this year, and there's not a clear plan of, hey, we're redshirting him, but he's coming along as a shooter. This is kind of the 2-year, 3-year plan, or at least 1 to 2 year plan that we have, where it's like, okay, you're signing some of these kids and then not developing them, and then they like Jackson Grant, 4-star McDonald's All-American, signs out of Olympia, doesn't develop, transfers out. And so it's like, okay, you're signing big men, you're targeting, you understand the principle here, but the execution isn't there on a consistent, especially on a consistent basis, right? Like, you had at one point, Jaden McDaniels, Marquise Chris, there's a number of guys you could point to where it's, hey, okay, they're not perfect, right? But at least every year, every other year, you got a guy. When was the last time Hopkins had a big that he truly produced?
Right. Like Isaiah Stewart's probably the only name that you can point to.
Exactly. Which is a great name, but
great name.
That was a while ago.
Yeah. Lars, as always, thank you so much for being here. Thank you all the everydayers for tuning in. We really do appreciate all your support. Yeah, we switched it up a little bit and talk some basketball. We're going to get way more into the football stuff as we go along here, recruiting, whatever else we possibly can. And to make sure you stay up to date with all the latest news, make sure you subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts, whether that's YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music. We're there. We're everywhere. We're updating this channel with new content every single day. So please make sure you hit that bell so you never miss a video. It gives you a nice little notification every time we put something out. And please make sure to like the video. Leave us a comment down below if you have any questions, comments, or concerns. And if you're an audio-only listener, please feel free to leave us a 5-star review, as it all really does help the show out a lot. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we will talk to you on Wednesday.